Welcome back to Chessbox Worldwide. In the heart of Uganda, at the 2025 Rwabushenyi Memorial Open Championship, a true chess legend was expected to dominate. He was the reigning top seed, the formidable FIDE master Kawuma Patrick. But chess is not played on paper, it's played on the board, piece by bloody piece. Entering, Mwase, a player who wasn't just there to participate, he was there to conquer. The most electrifying battle came in this game. He took the white pieces, faced the giant, unleashed the positional monster, the Catalan Opening. What followed was a brutal, uncompromising clash of wills. We saw a solid positional battle turn into an absolute tactical whirlwind after a single fatal slip by the favorite on move 19. This game is more than just a win. It's a statement. It's the moment the underdog grabbed the top seed by the throat and delivered a stunning decisive checkmate on move 29. Get ready. This is Mwase vs FIDE master Patrick Kawuma, the upset had around Uganda. Let's dive into the fire. Don't forget, please subscribe, like and comment to support the channel. And the white pieces, Mwase Matthew opened the game with 1d4, knight f6, c4, e6, g3, d5, and after bishop g2, introducing us the Catalan Opening, bishop comes to b4, check, knight comes to d2, short castling, knight f3, and in this position, Patrick played b6, trying to fianchetto his bishop on b7, short castling from Matthew. Knight bd7 is absolutely the best move in the position. For example, in case of knight bd7, and in case of white playing pawn comes to f3, then we can always drop the bishop on d6. And in case of pawn coming to b4, then c5, supported by the knight and the bishop. But however, after short castling, he played bishop b7, and it was in this position that Matthew played a3, hitting on the bishop, and after bishop d6, he played b4, and in this position, Patrick went on and played c5. But however, f5 should have been considered. For example, after f5, we could have seen c5, and in case of bishop coming to e7, bishop comes to b2, bishop s6, knight coming to e5, knight d7. This would be an equal position. But however, after b4, Patrick played c5 and Matthew played pawn takes c5, pawn takes c5, rook b1. It was high time Patrick goes on and plays queen c8. For example, after queen c8, we could have seen pawn takes c5, bishop takes c5, and knight b3. But however, after rook b1, he played queen c7. We see pawn takes c5, bishop takes c5, and now knight b3, hitting on the bishop on c5. So knight s6 should have been considered, protecting the bishop and also trying to connect the rooks. But he played bishop e7, and instantly Matthew played bishop f4, hitting on the queen. Bishop comes to d6. We see bishop takes d6, queen takes d6, knight comes to a5, hitting on the bishop, which is sitting on b7. Bishop s6, moving the bishop from harm's way and also putting an eye on the free diagonal. Pawn takes d5, knight takes d5, but pawn takes d5 should have been considered. In this position, Matthew sacrifices an exchange because he wants to take two pieces for the piece. We see e4. Remember, the queen has pinned the queen on d6. Bishop takes f1, bishop takes f1, and in this position, Patrick went on and played queen c7, putting an eye on the knight, which is sitting on f5. But however, queen takes f3 should have been considered, and in case of knight coming to c4, queen c5, pawn takes d5, queen takes d5, and after queen comes to e2, knight c6, h4, rook comes to d8, queen e3, knight d4, and knight comes to e5, with a promising position. But however, after bishop takes f1, Patrick played queen c7 and Matthew played pawn takes d5. So queen takes a5. Matthew went on ahead and played pawn takes e6 once again. And it was in this position that Patrick went on and played pawn capturing pawn on e6. But however, knight c6 should have been considered. And in case of pawn takes f7, king h8, with a promising position. But after pawn takes e6, he played pawn takes e6. Matthew played knight d4, hitting on the pawn which is on e6, and also opening up for the bishop to sit on this golden diagonal. It was in this position that Patrick went and played knight d7. But however, queen e5 should have been considered. After queen g4, we could have seen knight comes to d7, and after knight takes e6, rook f7, bishop comes to c4, king would go to h8, moving away from the battle of the bishop. Knight comes to g5, rook comes to f8, and after knight f7 check, rook takes f7, bishop takes f7, with a pleasant position to play. But however, after knight d4, Patrick played knight d7. Matthew went on and played knight takes e6, hitting on the rook and also opening up for the queen to hit on the knight which is on d7. In this position, knight e5 should have been considered, but Patrick played rook f7. Matthew played the best continuation. He played rook b5, hitting on the queen which is sitting on f5, supported by the bishop on f1, and now we see queen takes f3, knight comes to g5, hitting on the rook, and And remember that also the knight on d7 is also a hung piece. In this position, Patrick went on and played knight d6. But however, pawn s6 hitting on the rook on b5 should have been considered. Rook b3, we could have seen queen e7. And in case of knight takes f7, queen takes f7. And after bishop coming to g2, hitting on the rook and also putting an eye on the d5 square, could have seen rook e8. And in case of bishop d5, pinning the queen against the king, then we play this ultimate best continuation. Rook e1 check, and after queen takes e1 deflecting the queen, then queen takes d5, queen e8 check, and knight f8 with a promising continuation. But however, after knight d5, Patrick played knight b6. Matthew played knight takes f7. The knight on f7 is untouchable. Queen f4 should have been considered, trying to exchange the pieces off the board. But Patrick played king takes f7 and Matthew played bishop c4 check. In case you go ahead and ignore the bishop, which is on c4, and you play moves like king f8, this is over. It's just checkmate in 8, because after rook comes to f8 check, king would come to e7, rook f7 check, king e8, then queen e1, and I can tell you it is just a matter of time, but it's soon going to be over. That's why after bishop c4 check, Patrick tried knight takes c4, Matthew played queen d5 check, checking the king and also putting an eye on the rook, which is on a8, and Patrick couldn't jump out of the checkmate. In case you even try moves like king comes to e8, still the checkmate is still unavoidable. But king e8, we could see queen takes a8, king goes to d7, queen d5 check, after knight comes to d6, rook b7 check, king d8, king goes to g2, h6, rook takes g7, queen s6, and rook h7. Still, it is a fighting game, but Matthew will be dominating and threatening all directions, checkmate the black king. That's after queen d5, Patrick tried king f6, and it was in this position after queen f5 check that Patrick resigned the game, because it is checkmate in 5. For example, after king comes to e7, rook b7 check, king d6, rook d7 check, and after queen comes to c6, queen d5 check, king b6, rook b7 check, and after king s6, queen b5 would be checkmate. That's why in this position, after queen f5 check, Patrick resigned the game. Thank you so much for watching, and I wish you the best of luck in your games.